I'm not much of a fan of historical novels, but there's an exception, and it's a major one at that. The exception is Patrick O'Brian. He wrote 21 books in a series about the Royal Navy during the Napoleonic Wars. I've read that entire series maybe 4 times. Now, this review isn't intended for those of you who have already a fan of Patrick O'Brian. Instead, it's for any of you who haven't read him yet. My intention is to introduce you to him and to encourage you, quite frankly, to pick up his books. So like I said, all of those novels take place in the first 20 or so years of the 19th century. The action fundamentally involves the Napoleonic Wars and also a little bit of the War of 1812 with the United States. The locations are all over the world, any place you can imagine, from the English countryside to the South Pole. Now, just like the United States now has the finest Navy in the world, and its carriers and subs are the peak of naval engineering, the Royal Navy was the same thing in the 19th century. Their wooden ships were the absolute tops in engineering for that time. Back to the books. There are 2 main characters who provide continuity from book to book. The first is a man named Jack Aubrey. He's an officer in the Royal Navy, and over the course of the books, he commands a number of ships. In a word, he is an action figure. If you want a good picture of him, think Russell Crowe. He loves to fight, and he loves to sail. On the other hand, he's got some interesting personal characteristics that really make him stand out. He's an ace mathematician, an astronomer, an expert navigator, and a super competent sailor. He's a great leader in battle, and as a matter of fact, he's modeled on a real-life British admiral, a guy named Lord Cochrane. And finally, he likes to play the violin on his cruises and in duets with the other main character in the books. The person he plays with, the other main character, is a guy named Stephen Maturin. Maturin is a doctor, a ship's surgeon. He's an intelligence agent, an amateur naturalist, and an expert marksman. He was born in Ireland, raised in Spain, and he's kind of philosophical in nature. He absolutely hates Napoleon. And for the duets with Aubrey, he plays the cello. Now, Aubrey and Maturin are sort of an odd couple. You can think of these guys as like Captain Kirk on the one hand, and a combination of Spock and McCoy on the other. Now, there are half a dozen or so continuing secondary characters, and for the most part, they're members of the crews on Aubrey's ships. And they also have very distinct and interesting personalities. There are also characters who are primarily on land. They include Aubrey and Maturin's love interests, as well as government officials, spies, traitors, a good bunch. I have to say, Aubrey's ships are kind of characters in the books as well. Now back to the books. The plots are very, very diverse. As you'd expect, the novels are primarily concerned with ships and battles, but they have a whole lot more in them. Shipwrecks, maroonings, and sea chases that go on for hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles. When the action shifts to the land, and it does, the plots involve things like romance, intelligence gathering, stock manipulation, and all kinds of other things. Let me put it like this. The first time you go through these books, you're continually surprised. O'Brian got the details for the battles and the voyages from general histories of the period, the life of Cochrane, who I said Aubrey was modeled on, and also ship logs and letters from guys in the Royal Navy. I suppose the human elements probably spring largely from O'Brian's imagination, and he's got a great one. And he cleverly weaves together historical action and human drama. Now, I've got to be frank and say that the books can be a little bit intimidating at first. O'Brien uses the jargon of 19th century sailing and ships, and at first, you don't know what they're talking about when they use terms like the weather gauge, sailing on a bowline, or stunsails. But what I found was that plowing ahead, even without understanding every word or concept in the text, I got the drift of what was going on, and I was able to follow the story. Later, after I was totally red hot for these books, I bought a lexicon that defined every term O'Brien uses, and they meant a lot more. Now, these books have given rise to a little cottage industry that came up around them. In addition to lexicons, there are atlases that describe the voyages and the maps, CDs for the music that Aubrey and Maturin play at night, and there's even a cookbook. Now, there are two audio versions of the books. The first version is by an actor named Matrick, and they're pretty good. The second is by, the guy who's my favorite British reader, a guy named Simon Vance, and he does a great job with his voice depicting Aubrey, Maturin, and all the secondary characters. The thing that got me started on this was a review that was in the New York Times in the early 1990s of one of the books in the series. I had never read O'Brien before. The book was The Wine Dark Sea, and that phrase kind of rang a bell with me. And the reviewer said, "These are the finest historical novels that were ever written." Well, I decided to pick up The Wine Dark Sea, and I read it, and I enjoyed it, and then I went back and started with the whole beginning of the series. And when I came out the other end, I thought, maybe this reviewer got it dead right. Maybe these are the best historical novels ever written. Well, one way or another, I recommend that you give them a try. If you haven't read them yet, and if you're looking for something to read, you're going to love these books. So it's Patrick O'Brien, and the name of, and it's referred to as the Aubrey Maturin series. Thoroughly recommend it. Check back next Sunday. I'll probably have a review of something else. I don't know what it's going to be. Sunday mornings, I publish a review of a book that I think is worth bringing to your attention. Here are links to some of my other ones.